faithfully sharing value and interpreting the world's best books. Hi there, this is Sally with the Book Talk. Today, we're interpreting the book Oliver Twist for you, written by British author Charles Dickens. Dickens was the most popular novelist in early Victorian England. So, how popular was he? Back then, novels were serialized in newspapers, and whenever Dickens' works got an update, the papers sold out instantly. Over 100 years later, his works like The Pickwick Papers, David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, and Great Expectations still get adapted into movies and TV shows. The Oliver Twist we're covering today is Dickens' early work. Its original English title is Oliver Twist, which directly translates to Oliver Twist. Actually, that's our protagonist's name. He's an orphan. But when you open the book's first page, you won't meet him. The first character readers meet is a biographer who claims to write Oliver's biography. He's like a storyteller, and the whole tale unfolds from his view. First, the storyteller takes us to a small town near London. One night, a young pregnant woman travels alone to the town and collapses by the roadside. She's found by the overseer of the parish workhouse. The workhouse is where the church specifically aids the poor. This woman gives birth to a baby boy in the workhouse and then sadly dies. That poor orphan is our protagonist, Oliver Twist. Oliver grows up in the workhouse's foster home until he's 9. For 9 years, he endures constant hunger and all sorts of physical punishments. One day, Oliver and his pals are starving so badly they draw lots to send one kid after dinner to ask the cook for an extra bowl of porridge, and unluckily, Oliver gets picked. After the last sip of thin porridge, Oliver walks to the cook with spoon and bowl, musters all his courage, and says he wants another bowl. The cook is a strong, burly guy, but hearing Oliver's request, he turns pale with shock because no bold little kid ever dared ask for such a thing. Then the cook swings the ladle and whacks Oliver right on the head, making him dizzy. And this is just the beginning of the punishment Oliver is about to suffer. Dickens sarcastically wrote that Oliver committed a blasphemous and rebellious crime by openly asking for more gruel. For a week after that, he became a significant prisoner, locked alone in a dark room. This arrangement was made by the board's foresight and great mercy, all for asking for an extra bowl of porridge. The cook thought little Oliver had moral issues, and to get rid of this disobedient boy, the workhouse offered a reward. Anyone who took him away could get £5. Later, little Oliver was taken by an undertaker and became an apprentice, working like a slave every day, eating scraps and having to attend funerals for dead children in the parish. Oliver could endure all this, but the one thing he couldn't stand was when the older apprentice called his mother a prostitute. So he fought back against the bully. After being beaten and confined, little Oliver seized the chance to escape. He fled along a small path toward the foggy capital he'd heard adults talk about countless times. London. Hearing this, you might ask, why was the workhouse so heartless? Well, that brings us to Dickens' creative background. After the Industrial Revolution, Britain quickly became a world superpower. Social wealth increased rapidly. Industrial cities like London grew massively, and social class polarization became severe. The rich lived lavish lives, while the poor, working in dangerous mines and factories, struggled. By the time Dickens wrote Oliver Twist in the late 1830s, social class conflicts became more apparent. The urban bourgeoisie demanded political rights, and citizens gained voting rights. But these people who embraced capitalist values, once they got voting rights, surprisingly passed a bill called the Poor Law. They claimed that the misfortune of the lower classes wasn't due to the social system, but to their own laziness. Lazy people were immoral and shouldn't get social welfare for free. So at the start of the story, the workhouse cook thought little Oliver daring to ask for more porridge was sheer moral corruption, because the poor law stipulated that if the poor wanted public assistance, they had to work. So this law, seemingly meant to aid the poor, actually became legal justification for the upper class to exploit the lower class, turning what should be a refuge into the deepest pit of suffering. At the very bottom of the workhouse hierarchy were weak, sickly orphans with no one to rely on. These children spent their days surrounded by poverty and crime, receiving neither proper education nor genuine care. To draw kind hearted people's attention to their plight, the author created an angelic child to fight against this ugly world. Beyond social context, the writer's personal experiences also provided material. Dickens' parents were originally middle class and should have lived comfortably. But when his father was imprisoned for debt, when Dickens was 11, he became a child laborer in a workshop. During his crucial education years, Dickens spent time in dark, filthy factories, an experience that taught him society's secrets like a precious textbook. This influenced his lifelong writing. This experience infused Oliver Twist with authentic details, giving it realistic depth. That's all for Oliver Twist's background. Now let's return to little Oliver. After starving and walking to London, what happened next? Oliver's first London friend was a boy his age who called himself the Artful Dodger. Though generous, treating Oliver to a rare full meal, Oliver still found him odd and pretentious, deliberately imitating adults in his mannerisms. Learning Oliver had nowhere to go, the Dodger took him to a remote, grimy, cramped house. There, Oliver met an old Jew named Fagin and a group of boys like the Dodger. After eating their fill, their favorite game involved Fagin dressing as an upper-class gentleman with a pocket watch and wallet, pretending to stroll. The boys would then pair up, silently follow him, and steal his valuables when he least expected. When Oliver first saw people playing this game, he found it utterly fascinating, completely missing its sinister meaning. It wasn't until this scene played out on the street, under Fagin's direction, that the Artful Dodger and his pals took Oliver out to work. Just as little Oliver grew curious about their upcoming task, he saw the two boys head toward an old gentleman engrossed in reading at a bookstall. In a flash, they used their nimble skills to strip the old gentleman of all valuables. Then they dashed around the corner and vanished. Only then did Oliver finally understand the game's true nature. At that moment, he felt terror and panic. Here's how Dickens described this scene. In an instant, the gold watch, jewels, the whole mystery of the old Jew flooded the child's mind. He froze. Fear sent blood rushing through his veins like fire, then panic took hold. Blind with terror, he fled desperately, not knowing why. Imagine an elderly gentleman discovers all his valuables gone, and a small, ragged child sprinting away. He'd instinctively assume Oliver was the thief. The gentleman yelled, "Stop thief," mobilizing everyone on the street. A rionist chaotic erupted after Oliver, including the two real thieves. Their thief-crying thief trick was a classic escape tactic. Once the crowd fixated on Oliver, the Dodger and his friend vanished into an alley. Finally, someone struck little Oliver. He collapsed, covered in mud, blood trickling from his mouth. Police arrived, hauling Oliver to court with brutal force. Before revealing Oliver's fate, let's follow the Dodger back to Fagin's den. A quick overview of that place. You've likely guessed, old Jew Fagin is a villain who teaches poor kids to steal, luring them with scraps while profiting massively from their crimes. Here, Dickens plays a sly joke. Fagin in English literally means one who incites others to crime. At this moment, Fagin was discussing plans with his accomplice, Mr. Sykes, another habitual criminal, though unlike the kid's petty thefts, he made his living through burglary, stealing large quantities of gold and silverware. Old Fagin handled fencing the stolen goods. Fagin feared inexperienced Oliver couldn't withstand courtroom pressure. and would betray both him and Sykes. While hastily packing valuables and relocating the children, he dispatched his former star pupil, Nancy, now Sykes' girlfriend, to pose as Oliver's sister and gather intel at the police station. But at the station, Nancy found no trace of Oliver. An old vagrant told her Oliver had been acquitted. Turns out, little Oliver collapsed in court. Weakened by chronic hunger, shock, and injuries, he developed a fever. Mr. Brownlow, the victim, pitied him and moved to drop charges. And just then, the bookseller testified he saw two other boys stealing, so Oliver was declared innocent. Kind Mr. Brownlow took him home and nursed him back to health. Now, at this point in the story, Dickens has carefully crafted two morally distinct factions. One is the angelic camp, Oliver and Mr. Brownlow, kind, pure-hearted, treating everyone with goodwill. The other is the devilish camp, Fagin and Sykes, hypocritical, cunning, greedy. Though partners, they constantly scheme and distrust each other. Now, these opposing forces clash over Oliver. Mr. Brownlow adores Oliver, offering him shelter, security, and education. But the terrified Fagin plots to reclaim Oliver, fearing betrayal and coveting his small frame and quick mind for theft. Finally, the devilish camp gets their chance. Newly recovered, little Oliver volunteers to return books to the street vendor for Mr. Brownlow as gratitude. But Oliver ran into Nancy, who immediately seized the chance to pose as his sister and forcibly dragged him back to Fagin. To make Oliver submit, old Fagin used both carrot and stick. He locked Oliver up, making him feel that in such a gloomy place, any company was better than solitude. Meanwhile, he had the artful Dodger daily tell Oliver about the thrills of theft, brainwashing him that stealing was a promising career and pleasing Fagin was his only way out. Dickens wrote that Fagin was slowly injecting poison into Oliver's soul, trying to blacken his heart forever. All witnessed by Nancy. Little Oliver's plight reminded Nancy of her own past. Her conscience awoke, and she regretted returning him to Fagin. She resolved to help Oliver however she could. To quickly make Oliver a qualified thief, Sykes took him on a burglary. Under Sykes' tyranny, little Oliver had to join him. At the last moment, Oliver broke free and risked his life to alert the homeowners. The owner, realizing burglars were present, fired toward the noise. Oliver was shot and wounded, while Sykes fled, abandoning him on the dark roadside. Luckily, Oliver's innate fortune led him to Rose's family, angelic allies who rescued him and reunited him with Mr. Brownlow. Just as things improved, another mysterious figure appeared. His name was Monks, and he seemed intensely interested in Oliver. First, he bought Oliver's mother's only keepsake, a portrait locket, from workhouse officials. Then he bribed Fagin to rush Oliver into major crimes. Dickens showcased his mastery of suspense here. He kept characters and readers equally clueless about Monk's motives, leaving us vaguely uneasy for Oliver. Nancy, like us, worried deeply for Oliver. By chance, she overheard Monk's and Fagin's conspiracy. He managed to meet Rose and Mr. Brownlow. Mr. Brownlow risked a beating to report a possible conspiracy brewing to them. Many critics consider Nancy the most tragic and pitiable, yet most respected and sympathetic character in Oliver Twist. Although she's not the main character, she acts in many key plot points. We need to spend some time talking about her experiences. Like Oliver, Nancy was a poor orphan wandering the streets as a child. After being taken in by Fagin, she lived by stealing and as an adult was bought by the brutal Sykes to be his mistress. Despite living in harsh conditions, she never lost her conscience. Dickens adored this character, making Nancy shine with humanity. She is kind-hearted, willing to sacrifice herself to help little Oliver escape misery. She is loyal. Even though Sykes was cruel, she repaid him with devoted love as best she could. She is grateful. Nancy knew Fagin and Sykes were villains, but thanked them for protecting her in her weakest moments. So until the very end, Nancy pleaded with Mr. Brownlow not to expose them. Nancy is a character full of tragic elements. When informing Rose and Mr. Brownlow, Nancy refused monetary thanks and declined offers to help her move abroad. She explained to Mr. Brownlow, "I am chained to my past life. I hate it, loathe it, but I can't leave it." She nervously looked around and said, "I must go home." Nancy deliberately emphasized the word, "Yes, home. The home I built for myself through a lifetime of toil." One could say Nancy is caught between the angelic and devilish camps. The intertwining of good and evil makes this character full of contradictions. It is Nancy's contradictory nature that breaks the simple division of good and evil camps in Oliver Twist, elevating the work both in its criticism of reality and the depth of exploring tragic fate. All right, that's all. With Nancy caught between the angelic and devilish camps, we return to the story. Nancy didn't know that Fagin's henchman had overheard her talk with Mr. Brownlow and reported her betrayal to Sykes. Sykes, fearing Nancy would betray him, brutally beat her face with a gun butt and killed her. But Nancy's sacrifice wasn't in vain. Mr. Brownlow had already guessed the true identity of the mysterious monks based on her previous description. Nancy described monks as tall, sturdy, but not fat, walking sneakily. Despite being only in his 20s, his skin was wrinkled and quite haggard. His lips were often pale, with deep tooth marks. When he had a spasm, it was terrible, sometimes biting his hands full of scars. This reminded Mr. Brownlow of an old acquaintance, and everything was about to come to light. It turned out that Mr. Brownlow had always cared for little Oliver because he resembled his deceased good friend. This friend had an unhappy marriage and fathered an illegitimate child with a young woman. Mr. Brownlow promised his friend to take care of the mother and child, but he never found them. The mysterious monks was the legitimate son of Mr. Brownlow's friend. Monk's parents were separated for years. He grew up with his mother among disreputable friends and later picked up habits of fraud and robbery, forcing him to change his name. Although Monks abandoned his father's surname, he sought to inherit his entire estate. The father left no will, and Monk's only obstacle was his half-brother, over 10 years younger. Monks stirred up trouble to destroy any evidence proving the little orphan's identity and, ideally, make him morally corrupt and imprisoned so he could claim the inheritance alone. I bet you've guessed it. Our protagonist, Oliver, is that poor little orphan, and everything has finally come to light. Mr. Brownlow sent old Fagin to prison. The murderer, Sykes, accidentally died gruesomely while fleeing, and Monks suffered pains of conscience, vowing to reform. Little Oliver was adopted by Mr. Brownlow, and the story finally reached a happy ending where good is rewarded and evil punished. At the end of the novel, the author directly expressed his central theme. Without strong love, without benevolence, and without gratitude to God, whose creed is mercy and whose highest symbol is universal love for all beings, one can never attain happiness. Well, that's pretty much the end of the story. Next, let's discuss why Oliver Twist remains so popular both then and now. First, in terms of writing technique, the novel's plot is full of twists and maintains suspense throughout. Dickens was a master storyteller. He planted many clues, like hooks that connect the plot and pull you to keep reading. For example, when Mr. Brownlow first met little Oliver, he found his appearance quite endearing. Later, while recuperating at Mr. Brownlow's home, Oliver developed an inexplicable yet intimate affection for a portrait. This mysterious connection makes readers sense some link between Mr. Brownlow and Oliver's origins, yet they can't quite figure it out. It's not until the end that Dickens reveals the truth to us. Turns out, the portrait Oliver loved most depicted his biological mother. This painting was given to Brownlow by Oliver's father on his deathbed, hoping he'd find the woman and care for mother and child. But this foreshadowing design was actually necessitated by circumstances. Because novels were serialized in newspapers back then, An author's income depended on sales. To keep readers interested, Dickens had to pack each installment with conflict and suspense, much like TV writers today, making readers follow it like binge watching a show. Beyond the clever plot, Oliver Twist's detail handling is also exquisite. Dickens' writing style is distinctive, both delicate and vivid, yet witty and humorous. As mentioned earlier, Dickens created a narrator persona in Oliver Twist. When describing an unjust judge, he used the narrator to crack a joke. Dickens wrote, "He had little hair, mostly on the back and sides of his head, with a stern, excessively red face. If he truly didn't drink excessively, he could have sued his own appearance for slander to claim hefty damages." This humorous writing portrays a drunken, irritable old monster. Dickens also excelled at using everyday scenes to highlight dramatic conflict. For instance, in Oliver Twist, after Mr. Brownlow first took little Oliver home, he believed in the boy's inherent goodness. But one of Brownlow's friends insisted Oliver was as greedy and cunning as other street urchins. They played chess while betting on Oliver's character. To test their judgment, Brownlow sent the recently recovered Oliver to return valuable books with £5. Brownlow took out his pocket watch, betting Oliver would return within 20 minutes. While the friend insisted Oliver would flee with the books and money. Gee! Dickens wrote, "It grew so dark that the figures on the dial plate were scarcely discernible. The two old gentlemen sat silently with the watch between them." This simple description captured their clashing beliefs, inner turmoil, and hopes for humanity. This approach to detail influenced later British novels. Traces of Dickens are visible in works by George Eliot, D.H. Lawrence, and Henry James. These are all clever writing techniques. The novel's enduring charm lies in its intellectual depth. It confronts reality while nurturing ideals. Oliver Twist's realism operates on two levels. First, documenting era-defining features. Dickens meticulously recreates 19th century British society. We glimpse London's street life through his depiction of a market day. He wrote, "The ground was covered nearly ankle deep with filth. A thick steam perpetually rising from the reeking bodies of cattle mingled with the fog, lingering atop chimneys, hanging heavily over the market. In the central area, pens overflowed with livestock. Cattle crowded along ditch-side posts, amid butchers, brokers, hawkers, birches, thieves, onlookers, and society's dregs, all packed densely together. This exemplifies its realism. The second level is its focus on ordinary people. With compassionate prose, the author highlights struggles of the marginalized, especially children. Dickens didn't believe the poor lived in destitution because of laziness. His experiences in youth showed Dickens how society and environment shape people, revealing the social tragedy in characters like Nancy. Therefore, Oliver Twist is the first outstanding social novel in English literary history. At the end of Oliver Twist, Dickens mentions a child named Charlie, who, like the Artful Dodger, was driven to desperation by life. Under old Fagin's instigation, he committed theft. He's one of millions of orphans wandering the streets to survive, and Dickens gave him a hopeful vision. With his contented nature and resolve for goodness, Charlie finally achieved success. At first, he did odd jobs for farmers and worked as a porter's helper. Now he's the happiest rising star in animal husbandry across all of Northamptonshire. From this warm ending, we see that despite Dickens' focus on reality, his main aim was to convey a theme of striving upward and doing good. So the novel ends perfectly. Good rewarded, evil punished. That's the writer's beautiful hope for society's future. All right, that's all for our introduction to Dickens' Oliver Twist. Keynotes are below the audio. We'll meet again with the next great book.